Good afternoon. Good afternoon. This is Point of View with Miss Shirley Polk. I am so happy to be here today, and I hope that you're doing very well. It is by the grace of God that we are here today, and it is a wonderful thing that we are here. We are here by the grace of God. Dear God, as I sit before you to speak, I pray to you that my soul you will keep. And if I should die before I finish, I pray to you, dear God, in the name of Jesus, that any outstanding sins will be forgiven. Amen. Okay, hi. Hello. Howdy. Today, oh my goodness, there's so much going on in this world. So much happening. And right here in this United States of America where we live, there is so much going on. And it's because of people's mindsets, it's because people are doing things and saying things that they really shouldn't be saying, but because of who they are and what's in them, they're doing these things and saying these things. So I am just grateful because thank God, I have enough in me, and our parents, mom and daddy, instilled in us that you love other people and you treat other people like you want to be treated. But I'm going to go into let me see, the depths of it today as far as I can go on today. And my topic is the deep seat. And when we talk about deep seat, we talk about deep seated. And what does it mean? What does deep seated mean? I want to get here because this is very important, and it has to do with what we are going to talk about today. Talking about the deep seat, talked about the deep seated hatred, the deep seated prejudices, the deep seated um, anger, all of that is deep seated. And when it's deep seated, that means that it's way down inside of a person. It's so deep in there that it's difficult to overcome it. What does deep seated mean? It means situated far below the surface, and its causes have been there for a long time. Talking about deep seated, it's situated far below the surface. That's what deep seated means. So we're going to go right into this because I want to talk about prejudice. There's so much prejudice, hatred, superiority complex, all of that is going on right here today, right here and now. It's going on right here and now. So we'll go right into that. Thanks be to God for everything that He's doing for us. He's doing, He will do. He's already done for us, and it's just a blessing that we're able to be here today in spite of everything that's going on. I've been watching snippets of the broadcast stations when they're reporting on things that are going on that are being said during this election year, and the candidates and the people who are in those camps with those people, what they're saying, and so many different things going on. And we see the deep seated hatred and the deep seated prejudices that are inside of people. And I want to go here to one thing. There are so many people who are targets of this deep-seated hatred, prejudice. They're victims. I would say, should I say victims? I don't know, of the superiority complex in so many people. Those people are yet supporting these people who are belittling them, who have shown unmistakable deep-seated hatred, deep-seated prejudices, and have shown and are displaying that superiority complex. Now, I want to talk about something because I think about this sometimes, and it's because why do people let the abuser have power over them? Why do they still support them? And I saw one of my pieces here having power over people. And this all goes with the deep seated prejudice, the deep seated hatred, the superiority complex. That's all about power. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're in control, but they still, true control is about having influence and ability to affect outcomes. And when people know what to say, what tone to say it in, they can get other people's attention. So I'm going to go to this, and I believe it is so true. I'm going to psychology today, and then I'll go back to this deep-seated hatred, prejudice, and then go to superiority complex. But I want to talk about and the psychological explanation for why people are supporting people who are abusive to them mentally, emotionally, and they down them and they still support these people. So it's going to be the psychological slavery. And the slave mentality, understanding the complexity of psychological slavery. And not only people of brown skin have been slaves. There are people of Hispanic descent and the people of African descent, brown skinned people of African, and some prefer to be called black, but my skin tone is brown, and I'll say that always. And so they have been slaves. Many people, many different ethnicities, the Caucasian people who are poor, they have been slaves, like sharecroppers and people like that have been cheated. There's all kinds of ethnic groups have been victims of slavery. So this is a piece that was reviewed by Jessica Schrader, and this was done in 2014. This piece. But it's yet good today. According to relevant literature, slavery has been a legal institution in which one person, the slave, is the property of another, the master. Slavery dates back to ancient times, but contemporary international treaties, Slavery Convention of 1926, consider slavery a crime against humanity. And there are people, we see them on television, we hear them talking about they say, I'm going to vote for this person. This person is the best person. This person is downing their ethnicity and saying all kinds of things and about their mental capacity, making fun of them publicly and all of that. And they're still saying, I'm supporting this person. Now, you support who you want to, but I just want to explain this, okay? Talking about that slavery mentality. So, however, slavery and human exploitation still exist. Along with them, we are left with a legacy of psychological slavery that we see in many homes where highly abusive relationships prevail. Many studies in the field of psychology and sociology explain psychological slavery based on an incident that occurred in 1973 where two robbers entered a bank in Stockholm, Sweden with guns and dynamite, took four hostages, three women and a man, and held them hostage for 131 hours. After their rescue, the hostages showed a peculiar behavior. These people who had been threatened, abused, and intimidated felt gratitude towards their captors and tried to protect them when expert investigations were made. So one of the women became emotionally attached to one of the assailants and another began a campaign to raise funds for the legal defense of the criminals. As strange as it sounds, similar situations occur in daily life with abused children, with battered women in relationships, prisoners of war, victims of incest, and generally in families where there is a physical and or emotional abuse. Now I'm going to get to this deep seat, but there are some things that maybe we haven't brought to the attention of people who need to have it brought to the attention, to their attention. These things have so much to do with how we live our lives today. They have so much to do with how we live our lives today. The explanation lies in our survival instinct, described here as Stockholm Syndrome drone. When the lives of victims depend on the action of their assailants, the emotional reactions of some victims turn into gratitude once they survive, just as slaves may have also expressed gratitude when they were given their freedom. Similarly, in many contemporary families, the victims feeling hopeless develop positive feelings toward the abuser or controller, rationalize to accept such behavior, react negatively to family or friends who try to rescue them and have difficulty freeing themselves from this emotional trap. So when you see these things and you see people out there supporting people who are vocal and public about how they feel about someone of the opposite ethnicity, how they berate people, how they talk about them, and how they say all kinds of things. Like we see so much, and here's so much going on in this day, in this time, with this 2024 presidential election, and even for the Senate, even for Congress, people are saying so many evil things, and there are people in the ethnicity group of the people they're saying these things about, calling them names, saying all kinds of derogatory things about them, all kinds of slanderous lies and different things, and these people still support these people. They have difficulty freeing themselves from this emotional trap. It's an emotional trap. For psychological slavery to occur, research studies have found four typical situations: perception of a threat, physical or psychological, and the conviction that misfortune can really occur. Then the next one, appreciation of small acts of kindness by the abuser towards the victim. Next, isolation from others. And the fourth one, conviction that one is unable to escape the situation. Some people accept the situation because they feel that the turnout is going to be in one way in the favor of the person that is the, I'll say, abuser. So they go ahead and settle their minds to the fact that, okay, we're going to be in this situation, so I might as well go ahead and accept it and support it. So, just as in the case of the bank hostages in Sweden, interpersonal relationships where there is an abuse of power also establish a similar pattern which is hard to escape, resulting in psychological slavery. I believe this is what's happening when people are supporting people and they know, they've seen, they've heard, they have evidence that these people do not like the people of their ethnic persuasion, but they still support those people. I feel like if you talk about me and my ethnicity, my shade, my skin tone, you talk about me in a negative way, that means you're talking about all of us. All of us. So threats may be direct or indirect. The threat may even be directed toward other family members. When a person feels threatened, the reaction is to find hope in anything that will strengthen the will to survive. Some people believe that a certain person, even though they're abusive, they're prejudiced, they have a superiority complex, these people can do them good. They try to find hope in anything that will strengthen the will to survive. So they feel, well, this person's gonna do it anyway, so I might as well get behind them and I might as well support them. So when the abuser or controller offers small acts of kindness, I'm gonna do this for you, I'm going to do that for you, and I gave this and I did that, even though it might be a bold faced untruth, they still fall for it because of that psychological slavery mentality. So when the abuser or controller offers small acts of kindness, such as a glass of water, the victim may think that behind the maliciousness, the perpetrator has positive feelings and good intentions. As a consequence, a spiritual connection and gratitude for still being alive are established. The victim may rationalize and justify the criminal behavior. Just put out your hand, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to, didn't I do this, and didn't I give you uh, this money when things were supposed to be bad? Did not do this. Couldn't do anything. You might have the position, well, you don't have the power, and it was not voted in when like the president, they have the position, but they depend on Congress, the Senate, the House of Representatives, all of those people to support them on whatever they're trying to do. The victim may rationalize and justify the criminal behavior. Moreover, they may genuinely try to help the criminal emotionally, feeling the pain of the other instead of their own pain. People see these evil things going on and they support the people who are doing the evil. When a person lives in a world of abuse and control, that person quickly learns to be careful of what to say or do for fear of provoking unrest that might result in violence. As a result, the victim tries to please the abuser or controller by worrying about everything that could disturb them, by trying to satisfy the wants and needs of the abuser or controller to keep the peace at any cost. Unfortunately, this attitude helps perpetuate the abuse. The abuser learns to demand more, to practice control and power. In turn, the victim must remain isolated so that the abuser can continue manipulating the victim, and with criticism and accusations, the victim agrees to be isolated to avoid conflict and embarrassment and detaches from family members. Overwhelmed by abuse and already depressed, the victim comes to accept the situation and considers it part of their life. So many people have been, would you call it unfortunate? So many people have seen other people get rich, what we call rich. They've seen people with so much and they might not have. They might be living from day to day, hour to hour, minute to minute. And that is a type of mentality that causes them to have hope in the person's promises. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And then, even though they know that it's a 99.9% chance that it won't happen, just because they said it, just because of the psychological slave mentality, they believe that stuff. Freeing oneself from that kind of relationship can be very difficult, even impossible. That's why you see people supporting people who they know hate their very being. They hate what they stand for. They're afraid of them. And I'm going to get into all of that, the causes of that deep seated prejudice, that hatred, and that superiority complex. I'm going to get into that. There is so much in this today, and I watch, I look, I see this going on, and I'm thinking, oh my God, it's just so much happening. But let me tell you this, don't ever forget that God is definitely in control, and people can say the things that they say and do the things that they do, but God is yet in control. I guarantee you He is. You do what you're supposed to do. When you do what you're supposed to do, you vote if you have the right to vote. You vote. I don't try to tell people who to vote for, but you vote for what's going to be the best for you. And so, talking about this psychological slavery, talking about this slave mentality, so many people have been victims. All it seems like they're victimized all their lives. So they rather uh, support the person who is more similar to the victimized. Okay, to the perpetrator. This psychological mindset is really something else. They often feel bound not only emotionally but also because of financial obligations, and I say that issues, the children's future, and or threats of death or suicide. Understanding the complexity of psychological slavery preserves the possibility of helping those who need it, keeping a connection, contributing to their self-esteem, and opening the door when the time comes to cherish their freedom. And it goes, that is a part, and the author here is Anna Nogalis, PhD, a clinical psychologist, and this is Psychology Today. Now, I wanted to read that, talking about that, was it psychological slavery, and I call it the uh, slave mentality. Slave mentality is a mindset or way of thinking which comes from being a slave. It is the perception that one merely accepted slavery as their lot in life. Slavery was abolished in the late 1800s, but only in the law books. For psychological slavery to occur, research studies have found four typical situations, and then I just talked about that: perception of threat, physical or psychological, and the conviction that misfortune can really occur. And those acts of kindness, small acts of kindness that the abuser gives them, they accept that and they think, oh, it's going to be all right. But it's not going to be all right. You have to get your mind straightened out and try to get away from that slave mentality and look and see what's going on in the world and know what's good for you, really good for you. So I'm going to talk about this power. People at what is it? They usurp power over other people, and they know just what to say. They pull in people who are like-minded, and they just harp on what they know that they have in common with these people. And even sometimes they might not have the same thing in common, but they know what gets these people's attention. And so they just push it and push it and push it. And that's how they get the gatherings. Power exists in our relationships. Having power means to have a sense of control, to have choices, and the ability to influence our environments and others. It's a natural and healthy instinct to exert our power to get our wants and needs met. And people exert that power. And when we feel empowered, we can manage our emotions. We believe that we matter and that we can affect outcomes, have a sense of efficacy, and that means control over what is going to happen. Efficacy. Efficacy is a noun that means the power, capacity to produce a desired result. So now I'm going to go to the article that I came across looking for why prejudices and it still exists. And like they said, slavery is just out. It's just unlawful in the law books because slavery still exists. Not only, I mean, actually, literally exists. And then there are people who are still enslaved in their minds, even though they've never, ever been an actual slave, like a servant of other people, but unless they work somewhere or whatever, but not a slave like we know a slave, a person that's under the total control of another person and doesn't gain anything from their labor or anything. They are controlled, definitely controlled. So let me get to, I know we have the superiority complex coming up, but I want to talk about what prejudices still exist. They still exist. Okay, I found that in, what is it, Washington Post. Washington Post. As a matter of fact, I think, is it Washington Post that's in the news today? I think I was watching a view earlier, and I think it was one of those newspapers that wouldn't allow uh, Kamala Harris or wouldn't allow anything about her in there. Okay, here we go. Here we go. Why are people still racist? What science says about America's race problem. What science says about it. America's race problem. And this is by William Wan and Sarah Kaplan. And this piece was back in 2017. Torch-bearing white supremacists shouting racist and anti-Semitic slogans, protesters and counter-protesters colliding with violence and chaos. We see it happening every time a newscast comes on. A broadcast, you see this most of the time, especially now. And we saw some of the most awful and heard some of the most awful comments from people uh, last night, and they're still playing it over and over. Torch bearing white supremacists, a car driven, and remember when that man mowed the people down that were out there in the streets. So, amid our modern clashes, researchers in psychology, sociology, and neurology have been studying the roots of racism. We draw on that research and asked two scientists to explain why people feel and act this way toward each other. And so many times we look out and beyond ourselves. Sometimes we need to check ourselves too, because there are some deep roots in us, some like psychological slave mentality that can be embedded in us, a deep root in us toward each other. And people can say what they want to or not, but why is it that we are so mean? Our own intra uh, ethnicity battles against superiority, the superiority complex, and the hatred, the jealousy, and the prejudices that exist within. So many times we look out and we criticize out, but are we looking in at ourselves? Because it's inward too. In as a whole, in the ethnic group. Yes, it is. That's, you see other people. Some people get together and they support each other because they have a common enemy. And sometimes you cannot get a certain ethnic group to come together totally to against a common enemy because there's so much prejudice and superiority complexes playing in the situation. So many people, I've got to be the leader, I've got to be the leader. Just so much going on. So many times we look out when we should be looking in. But now I'm talking about this that's going on today and the nasty things that are being said and in this that's going on here with this presidential campaign, with the Senate campaign, with the House of Representatives, the whole works. It's just terrible. It's just terrible. And then, oh my. Amid our modern clashes, researchers in psychology, sociology, and neurology have been studying the roots of racism. What causes people to be racist? In some ways, it's super simple. People learn to be whatever their society and culture teaches them. Now I'm talking about the deep seat, talking about the deep-seated hatred, the deep-seated prejudices, and I'm also talking about that superiority complex. We often assume that it takes parents actively teaching their children for them to be racist. The truth is that unless parents actively teach children not to be racist, they will be, said Jennifer Richardson, a Yale University social psychologist. So this is not the product of some deep-seated evil heart that is cultivated. It comes from the environment, the air all around us, and we feel it. It is so thick around us. Richardson compares children's instinctive formation of biases to a student at a new school. When you arrive at a new school, you are instinctively trying to figure out who's cool, who's not, who's a nerd, who gets beat up. Children quickly acquire these associations, she said. Now, to get a sense of just how pervasive and imperceptibly our environment can affect us, one study at Tufts University found that even with a TV show on mute displaying scenes with no explicit discrimination, the nonverbal body language of, okay, this is what the writer has in here, okay, black and white actors interacting was enough to cause watchers to test higher for implicit bias after and us them mentality is unfortunately a really basic part of our biology, said Eric Knowles, a psychology professor at New York University who studies prejudice and politics. There's a lot of evidence that people have an ingrained, even in evolved tendency toward people who are in our so-called in group. But how we define those groups and the tendency to draw divisions along racial lines is social, not biological, he added. We can draw those lines in a number of ways that society tells us, he says. When does racism drive people to commit violence? We have seen it happening. We have seen it happening. People are just on the broadcast today. I saw they showed two incidents where some person had set the ballot boxes on fire, destroying ballots. One box, only three ballots were destroyed. They were able to save the rest of them, but the other one, I think, all of the ballots, the people had voted and put their ballots in the ballot boxes that are placed out for collection, and some evil person set the ballot boxes on fire. When does racism drive people to commit violence. The most likely predictor of that is exposure to a kind of ideology, Knowles said. Most, if not all, people carry implicit biases and unexamined prejudices, he said, and some may harbor feelings of fear. This is where I wanted to get to. And some may harbor feelings of fear or resentment that they don't express in public. And I heard someone say that within a few years, that America will not be, what is it, like a minority and majority ethnic groups, but we'll all be mixed in together because there's um, so many mixed marriages, and children are being born of mixed relationships. So look at this: fear or resentment that they don't express in public. Some may harbor feelings of fear or resentment that they don't express in public. And what do we know about Hitler? He wanted a superior. What was it? Was it blonde hair, blue eyed? He wanted superior people. He didn't want, and he wanted tried to have everybody pure. You have to be pure, have pure blood. This is what's going on. He was afraid because he knew that with the way of the world and the people that were having and of other ethnic groups and everything, that power was there. There was success, even the Jewish people. They were successful. They had businesses. They went in there and they took their jewelry, they took their furniture, they took everything they had, and then took them and enslaved them and then killed so many thousands of them. It's fear and resentment. Look at the Africans that they got from African had dominance over them, mistreated them, beat them into what is servitude and everything because put the fear in them because of the fear that they had of the slaves. It comes down to fear. So he said, and some may harbor feelings of fear and resentment of success. I'm telling you, there's so much at play here in this prejudices and this racism, all of that. Fear is a big factor in that. People might not want to agree, but fear is a big factor in that. But when people come into contact with an organized, listen to this, ideology that valorizes and glorifies an intergroup struggle like a race struggle that scaffolds from people's everyday prejudices into something altogether more violent, and we see them revving the people up, it's because of the success of other ethnic groups, and they see that these groups, whatever they put their minds to, individuals in these ethnic groups, they can excel, succeed, and their lives are better. And there's so many excelling and succeeding, and the fear is entered into them and is there, and then it brings that's deep seated hatred and prejudice. It starts bringing that to the surface. Oh, yes. White supremacist groups promote a siege mentality among their followers, Knowles said. The rhetoric that aims to lead legitimacy to people's racial and ethnic fears. He pointed to the slogan shouted by participants in the Charlottesville rally: "You will not replace us." There we go. You will not replace us. White lives matter. You hear that? Fear. envy, jealousy, but most of all, fear. You will not replace us. I think that one thing that these violent ideologies are communicating to people and people are receptive to, especially people who are struggling, is that whites are actually the ones who are being discriminated against in society, Knowles said. Remember that the male presidential candidate got up and said that somebody was taking black jobs and they wonder what is a black job. This kind of ideology that gets people riled up, but it didn't work over here. Okay, Charlottesville was hardly the first time this thinking has been led to violence, and this was like in 2017. Okay, Dylan Roof, remember him, who shot and killed 9 people at a historic African Methodist Episcopal church in Charleston, South Carolina, justified the killing with a hate-filled rant in his journal in which he wrote that he wanted to take action for my race. Fear, fear, fear. You can't replace us. They're taking your jobs. They're doing this. They're doing that. They're taking your place. If you don't do something about it, they're going to take over. You won't even have a place. Yeah, ideology. Knowles has been studying what he calls everyday racism for nearly 2 decades. And so if he's still studying now, it would be 3 decades, right? He said he hasn't seen significant change in baseline levels of bias among Americans. Instead, he thinks more violent forms of racism are being unleashed. And we know that, don't we? Particularly, listen to what he said here by President Trump. That was at that time. Okay? He noted the president did not explicitly condemn the hate groups that organized the Charlottesville rally until 2 days after it was held. Okay? And remember when they stormed the, what was it, the Capitol, when they went in there and they were trying to harm the lawmakers. They couldn't get him to talk the people down, and he still won't admit that he caused that. But he has been convicted of at least 34 crimes, and they are yet letting him run for president. I'm not trying to tell you who to vote for. I'm just saying about the prejudices that exist, the ideology that brings all this stuff to the surface, people saying what they want to say out in public, talking about other groups of people, other ethnic groups, and call themselves belittling them. And I'm telling you something, they cannot belittle you if you don't want to be belittled. Okay? Just because they say some old nasty, dirty stuff about you doesn't mean that that is you. All right? That's them satisfying themselves because they're afraid that their power is going to be extinguished. Okay? The fetters are coming off, Knowles said. When you have a president who won't specifically signal out Nazis and white supremacists for opprobrium, and I got that word, opprobrium, because I always like to look up. It means harsh criticism or censure, the public disgrace arising from someone's shameful conduct, an occasion or cause of reproach or disgrace. Said he wouldn't condemn that. He wouldn't do it. The feds are coming up. Say when you have a president, and then they're talking about this what is it, 2025 thing. They say that thing is something else, something else. So when you have a president who won't call these people out, about it being bad and shameful and all that, that communicates something to people with racial resentment. That's a powerful message that these feelings you've been having, these racial and ethnic fears that are inside of you are okay to express. And we've seen that, haven't we? Can you teach people not to be racist? This is the next part of this. The only way to change bias is to change culture, Richardson said. You have to change what is acceptable in society. People today complain about politically correct culture, but what that does is provide a check of people's outward attitude, which in turn influences how we think about ourselves internally. Everything we're exposed to gives us messages about who is good and bad. And then those also agree that norms, NORMS, can serve as a check on expression of violent racism, but to challenge the deep seated prejudices that shape our behavior, to unlearn our implicit biases, we need contact, he said. We need contact. It's absolutely the opposite of what white nationalists want, which is segregated society. They want a segregated society, he said. We need an integrated society and at the same time need to create as much socioeconomic fairness as we can so what relationships people have across group lives are egalitarian relationships. That's the one thing that can create trust between people on each side of an us them divide. And the only thing in the long term I would put my money on to reduce prejudices. It is out here, it is running rampant, and it is accepted by so many people. Will racism disappear over time? Are the older people more racist and younger generations more progressive? Let's see what this talks about. It's a myth that our country will somehow become more progressive, and it's equally a myth to think that our children will save us. Richardson, and that's not Richardson, it's Richardson, just like I'm saying it. Richson. Most of alt right activists who sparked violence in Charlottesville, talking about 2017, uh, she pointed out, were young white men. There's data that shows young groups like millennials are more progressive and egalitarian, but that's usually on issues like climate change or gay marriage. And just this morning, I heard a young lady say, and I was watching her on the broadcast this morning when she said it, climate change and talking about what they're saying here, the rights of the people living alternative lifestyles. Usually not in their level of implicit bias, Richardson said. So, in fact, Richardson in recent years has been studying how white people react to the fact that America is shifting into a majority minority country. Didn't I just say that a few minutes ago? Where minorities make up more than 50%. That's 50% of the population. Now, that was back in 2017. So, in those studies, young white subjects responded just as strongly as older white ones with anxiety and uncertainty, expressing more negative, explicit, and implicit racial bias in tests. So, after reading about the coming demographic change, for example, white subjects, including college students, were more likely to agree with statements like, I would rather work alongside people of my same ethnic origin. You hear that? And it's worse than that today. You see it, you hear about it. You have to be careful. You have to be careful wherever you go. And people of the who in mixed marriages, you have to be careful. I've told you before. I know we have the right, and it's a wonderful thing that God has given us the freedom of choice, and we can choose our mate. We can. But there are people like this that I'm talking about out there looking for someone to harm because they don't fit their ideology, their ideals. So everybody has to be careful. Even if you're same ethnicity, you have to be careful. Yes, there have been gains in policy like allowing interracial marriage and discrimination laws, but when it comes to our interpersonal biases, it's simply not true that we just need to wait for the few old racist men left in the South to die off, and then we'll be fine. The rhetoric for racism is still in place. The environment for racism is still here. Unless we change that, we can't lessen racism. This is by William Wan and Sarah Kaplan. And William is an enterprise reporter at the Washington Post, and Sarah Kaplan is a climate reporter covering humanity's response to a warming world. So now let me go because I have 8 minutes here. I want to go to this superiority complex thing. That's what these people have. And I see where this guy uh, what is his name? The ex guy. He is giving people $1 million. And so now they're working on that, saying that he is violating some law, and they're working on which law he's violating. $1 million to vote the way they want them to vote. A superiority complex is a behavior that suggests a person believes they're someone superior to others. And we know and we've seen it, I mean, we see it every day. While not an official diagnosis, symptoms of it can occur with some conditions. People with this complex often have exaggerated opinions of themselves. We've seen it over and over again. They may believe their abilities and achievements surpass those of others. We've heard it over and over again. It's dangerous. It's dangerous, dangerous, dangerous. However, superiority complex may actually be hiding low self-esteem. You get it now? Or a sense of inferiority. And so these people, they uh, start putting these ideas in other people's heads because they're fearful. They feel inferior. So they have to play with people's minds and put things in people's minds to get people to see how they see and get people all riled up. And then people will say, yeah, 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 I'm with you, I'm with you. Listen to this because they have low self esteem, a sense of inferiority. Psychologist Alfred Adler first described the superiority complex in his late 20th century work. He outlined that the complex is really a defense mechanism for feelings of inadequacy that we all struggle with. And we can see it in the person. No, people that support a liar, as we see, they can put anything out there in the atmosphere and they don't never mind it being a lie. We just want to run with it and go with it. I'm not going to research it or anything. And some people research it, still know it's not the truth, and they still cling to it. In short, people with superiority complex frequently have boastful attitudes to people around them, but these are merely a way to cover up feelings of failure or shortcoming. Oh my goodness. So now, okay, how to tell if you have a superiority complex. Didn't I say we need to look closer? We need to look at home sometimes. The symptoms of superiority complex may include high valuations of self worth, boastful claims that are not backed up by reality, attention to appearance or vanity, overly high opinion of oneself, a self image of supremacy or authority, unwillingness to listen to others, over compensation for specific elements of life, mood swings, often made worse by contradiction from another person. We've seen it over and over again. Underlying low self esteem or feelings of inferiority. You may believe that you spot some of these symptoms in another person. They can be easy to identify, especially after a long relationship, but matching these symptoms to the complex itself is not that easy. Many of these symptoms can also be caused by several other conditions. These include narcissistic personality disorder and bipolar disorder. See, it's coming home now. It's coming home. And we can see these signs in people who are out there displaying these superiority complexes and this for the deep-seated racism and prejudices. We see these things happening and we can see these things. A mental health professional such as a psychologist or psychiatrist may be able to see beneath the symptoms to the real issue that is often a low self-esteem or sense of inferiority. If this is discovered, a superiority complex becomes distinct from other possible issues. Sometimes these people have had psychological evaluations and they know that they have these problems. They're narcissistic, they have these superiority complexes, they have low self-esteem, they're inferior in their minds to other people. A superiority complex is an exaggerated sense of self worth. It hides real feelings of mediocrity. And then an inferiority complex is an overstated feeling of weaknesses. So you can have a superiority complex, you can have an inferiority complex. And so the people with the superiority complexes, they play on people who have inferiority complexes, and that's how they become slaves to their ideology. An inferiority complex is an overstated feeling of weakness. It often hides true motives such as aspirations for power. Aspirations for power. I am going to stop right there. It all comes down to aspirations for power. Deep seat, the deep seat of prejudice, the deep seat of racism, and that superiority complex. Danger, 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 world. Like that robot said, danger, Will Robinson, danger, Will Robinson. I'm saying danger, world, danger, United States, danger, the deep seat. I love you so much, and I really appreciate you for being with me today. That's what's on my mind today, the deep seat. I appreciate you. Please let me hear from you. And please share this webcast and just let me hear from you. I appreciate you so much. I'm going to end with I love to teach the whole world music by the Polk Sisters and Company. This is what I want to do. Teach the whole world music in all these prejudices, envy, these racism, these superiority complexes, all this that's going on here in this world, and we know that the world is not going to get any better. It said evil men will wax worse and worse, but we ourselves can be better people. And the more of us will be better people, then that makes our environment better for us. So we're talking about the deep seek today. I love you so much. I love you. I love you. I love you. Thank you for being with me.